chilled right up. I was blown away. And just like thinking in the back of my head, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, don't. You got this, you got this, you got this.
No one prepares you for the moment when a life built on innocence collides with a nightmare no script could ever imagine. For more than 40 years, she was a symbol of purity, resilience, and moral strength. A woman who grew up before the eyes of the world, whose childhood felt stitched into the fabric of family television, whose face reminded millions of simpler times, honest values, and emotional warmth. Her name alone evoked trust.
The weight of it didn't hit me because all of the technical stuff of getting it done at first, when, it all happened really fast. Mike called me and asked me if I'd be interested. I said yes. And then there was nothing, and then there was nothing. And then all of a sudden, boom, he said, we need you on Tuesday. And this was on a Thursday. And we're negotiating my contract and getting me to Vancouver and blah, 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 blah. And so I didn't really have time to think long and hard about it. And I got on the set the first day and got dressed and was looking around and saw the town and was kind of getting a feel for it. And I walked into where they were holding us, where our chairs were, and I got so overwhelmed with emotion. And I realized, and I texted Michael and Leslie and said, you guys, I'm here with tears in my eyes because I just realized your dad would have loved this.
But in early 2026, that carefully guarded image cracked. Not because of a role she chose, not because of a scandal she created, but because her private world was suddenly dragged into a storm so dark, so disturbing, that it shattered decades of certainty in a single headline. Rumors long dismissed as whispers erupted into reality, forcing her to confront a truth she never saw coming. This was not about fame, not about career, not about the past she thought she had already survived. This was about love, betrayal, disbelief, and the terrifying realization that even the strongest lives can unravel in silence. This is the moment everything changed. This is where the real story begins. Long before the rumors, before the headlines, before the heartbreak, there was a child whose life began under studio lights instead of lullabies. She was born in Los Angeles, California in 1964 and adopted shortly after birth by parents who were already part of the entertainment world. From her earliest days, creativity surrounded her. Scripts, rehearsals, auditions, and quiet conversations about performance were not foreign sounds. They were simply the background of her childhood. While other children learned how to play, she learned how to perform. By the time she was old enough to form memories, she was already working. Television commercials came first, then guest appearances, each role sharpening something rare within her. There was an emotional sincerity in her eyes, a depth that felt far too mature for someone so young. Casting directors noticed, audiences felt it, and without realizing it, she was being pulled deeper into a world that rarely allows children to remain children for long. Fame did not arrive suddenly. It crept in quietly, normalizing itself until it felt permanent. And then, at just 9 years old, a single role changed everything. One audition, one decision, one character that would tie her identity to millions of living rooms across America. A role that would make her beloved, admired, and forever remembered. But that same role would also mark the end of a normal childhood, replacing it with expectations, pressure, and a life lived under constant observation. She was about to become someone the world would never forget. And in the process, she would begin losing pieces of herself she didn't yet know how to protect. In 1974, her life crossed a point of no return. At just 9 years old, she was chosen to portray Laura Ingalls in Little House on the Prairie. What seemed like a dream opportunity was, in reality, a transformation that would permanently fuse her identity with a single character in the hearts of millions. The series was more than a television show. It became a cultural anchor for families, a weekly ritual rooted in values like faith, perseverance, compassion, and moral responsibility. And at the center of it all was a little girl carrying emotional weight far heavier than her years should have allowed. Week after week, audiences watched Laura grow from a curious frontier child into a determined young woman. But what they were really watching was a child learning to process poverty, grief, disability, prejudice, and loss, not in private, but under the gaze of the entire world. The role demanded emotional truth, not pretending, and she delivered it with a maturity that stunned viewers and colleagues alike. Behind the scenes, the set became her classroom, her home, and her emotional training ground. The man who played her father on a screen became a guiding force off a screen as well, teaching her discipline, honesty, and the responsibility that comes with being seen and heard by millions. The cast and crew became an extended family, blurring the lines between work and life. Childhood friendships were replaced by professional expectations. Applause replaced privacy. And growing up happened not gradually, but all at once. When the series finally ended in 1983, the cameras stopped rolling, but the imprint it left on her never faded. To the world, she would always be Laura Ingalls, a symbol of warmth, strength, and innocence. But away from the screen, a new and far more difficult chapter was beginning, because surviving fame as a child is one thing. Learning how to live without it is something else entirely. When the show ended, the applause faded, but the silence that followed was far more dangerous. For years, her identity had been inseparable from the character the world adored. She had grown up with scripts telling her who she was, where to stand, how to feel. Suddenly, those scripts were gone, and for the first time, Melissa Gilbert had to discover who she was without a role to guide her. The transition from child star to adult actress is notoriously unforgiving, and her journey was no exception. Audiences wanted familiarity, but she wanted growth. Casting directors saw the girl they remembered, not the woman she was becoming. Still, she refused to disappear. She worked relentlessly, taking on television roles, made-for-TV movies, and the stage performances, each one an attempt to reclaim control over her craft and her future. One of her most demanding roles came when she portrayed Helen Keller in The Miracle Worker, a performance that stripped away comfort and required complete emotional exposure. It was proof that her talent extended far beyond nostalgia. On stage, she found something television had never fully given her: freedom. Theater allowed her to explore complexity, vulnerability, and a strength without the shadow of her childhood image looming over every scene. But while her career pushed forward, her personal life carried invisible weight. Growing up in the spotlight had left scars: the pressure to be perfect, the fear of disappointing others, the quiet belief that love was conditional, tied to performance and approval. She later spoke openly about struggles with self-doubt, addiction, and complicated family dynamics, challenges that had been building silently for years. Instead of hiding these truths, she chose honesty. She spoke about them not to shock, but to heal. In doing so, she shattered the illusion of the flawless child star and replaced it with something far more powerful: authenticity. Her vulnerability became a lifeline for others who had grown up feeling unseen, unheard, or overwhelmed by expectations they never asked for. Behind a strength the world admired was a woman learning, slowly and painfully, how to survive on her own terms, and soon her search for stability would lead her toward love, marriage, and motherhood, bringing both hope and heartbreak in equal measure. After years of living under pressure, she longed for something simple, something grounding, not applause, not validation, just a sense of normal life that fame had never allowed her to experience. In 1988, she stepped into marriage for the first time, believing it might offer the stability she had missed since childhood. The union marked a turning point, a quiet hope that adulthood could finally bring balance. When she became a mother, everything shifted. Motherhood grounded her in ways fame never could, giving her a purpose that felt real, immediate, and unconditional. But love, like fame, is rarely simple when lived in the public eye. As years passed, cracks formed, expectations clashed with reality, and emotional distance grew despite shared hopes and genuine effort. Eventually, the marriage ended. It was painful, but she remained committed to protecting her child and creating a sense of security that her own childhood had lacked. She tried again. A second marriage followed in the mid-1990s, bringing another son into her life and what appeared from the outside to be a fresh beginning. For a time, it worked. A blended family, shared responsibilities, and the belief that experience had finally taught her how to make love last. Yet even this chapter slowly unraveled, balancing career demands, personal growth, and motherhood proved overwhelming. Years later, the relationship ended in divorce, leaving her once again to rebuild herself, stronger but more cautious, more aware of how fragile happiness can be. Then love found her again, not in idealism, but in understanding. In 2013, she married Timothy Busfield, a man who, like her, carried the weight of past marriages and shared the wisdom that comes only from experience. Their wedding was private and intimate, far from the spectacle that once defined her life. Together, they formed a blended family rooted not in perfection, but in mutual respect and emotional honesty. For years, their life appeared calm, grounded, and deeply personal. To the public, it seemed she had finally reached a place of peace. A woman who had survived fame, heartbreak, and reinvention, now living quietly on her own terms. But beneath the surface, a storm was forming, and when it finally broke, it would become the most devastating chapter of her life, one that would force her to confront fear, disbelief, and a truth no one ever wants to face. In mid-January 2026, the life she had worked so hard to protect shattered overnight. For decades, she had been associated with warmth, integrity, and moral clarity, an image forged in childhood, reinforced by years of advocacy, honesty, and resilience. But this time, the headlines had nothing to do with her career, her health, or her political voice. This time, it was personal. On January 9, 2026, U.S. media reported that a warrant had been issued in New Mexico for the arrest of her husband. The accusations were severe and deeply disturbing. According to law enforcement, he was alleged to have sexually assaulted twin boys during the filming of a television series, with claims that the abuse occurred over an extended period of time. The allegations sent shockwaves through the public and the entertainment industry alike, not only because of their gravity, but because they struck at the very core of everything she stood for. She had spent much of her adult life advocating for accountability, child welfare, and truth. Now she was forced to confront accusations that felt impossible to reconcile with the man she believed she knew. In a statement attributed to her, she did not lash out. She did not deny reality. Instead, her words reflected devastation and restraint. She expressed shock and heartbreak, acknowledging the emotional weight of the situation, while emphasizing a critical distinction. Allegations are not conclusions, and the legal process must be allowed to unfold. Behind those measured words was a woman facing an unbearable conflict, love colliding with disbelief, loyalty colliding with responsibility, privacy colliding with a public storm that showed no mercy. As details emerged, the story intensified. Authorities revealed that the investigation had begun months earlier, quietly unfolding after a medical professional reported concerns in late 2024. What had been happening behind the scenes was now fully exposed, and the consequences were swift and unavoidable. For her, there was no safe place to stand. Every silence was questioned, every statement was dissected, and every emotion she showed or didn't show became part of the narrative. This was no longer just a legal case. It was a moral reckoning played out in real time. As the investigation moved forward, the pressure intensified from every direction. Questions flooded the media. Where was he? What did she know? How could this have happened without signs? The speculation was relentless, blurring the line between fact and assumption, between truth and rumor. For someone who had spent her life under observation, this scrutiny felt different, colder, more invasive, more unforgiving. She responded not with outrage, but with clarity. She stated publicly that she had cooperated fully and transparently with authorities, making it clear that she would not obstruct justice in any way. There was no attempt to control the narrative, no effort to redirect blame. Instead, she chose restraint, even as her private pain was dissected in real time. Professional consequences followed swiftly. Networks pulled scheduled episodes featuring her husband, citing sensitivity to the nature of the allegations. The irony was impossible to ignore. Stories about justice and protection airing alongside accusations that suggested the very opposite. For her, it felt like watching the foundations of her life fracture, piece by piece, in front of an audience she never invited. Then came another blow. Days after the warrant was issued, authorities reported they had been unable to locate him. The U.S. Marshals Service became involved, and media speculation reached a fever pitch. Each passing hour without resolution deepened the uncertainty, not just legally, but emotionally. When he finally turned himself in, it did not bring relief. There was no sense of closure, no clarity, only the heavy realization that the process was just beginning. She described the moment not as an ending, but as a reckoning, a point where denial was no longer possible, and the path ahead would be slow, painful, and public. Amid it all, she did not center herself as the victim. Instead, she expressed concern for the alleged children involved, stating that if harm had occurred, they deserved protection, compassion, and truth above all else. Those words carried weight, not because they were dramatic, but because they were consistent with the values she had lived by for decades. In confirming the rumors surrounding her private life, she offered no spectacle, no emotional collapse for cameras, just the quiet voice of a woman navigating disbelief, responsibility, and grief all at once. Sometimes courage does not look like defiance. Sometimes it looks like standing still while everything you love falls apart. When the headlines finally slowed, the silence that followed was heavier than the noise. There was no victory, no resolution, no moment that felt like relief. Turning himself in did not restore order to her life, nor did it answer the questions that now haunted every quiet moment. It only confirmed what she already knew, that the road ahead would be long, uncertain, and painfully public. She spoke not as a celebrity, but as a human being. She described herself as a wife caught between love and disbelief, a mother protecting her children from a reality too cruel to fully explain, and a woman forced to reconcile personal trust with moral responsibility. Her words carried no anger, only exhaustion and clarity. She asked for privacy, not to escape accountability, but to survive the emotional weight of what was unfolding. Public reaction was divided. Some expressed sympathy, recognizing the impossible position she had been placed in. Others questioned how such allegations could exist without warning signs. The truth, as it often is, remained complex and deeply uncomfortable. What stood out most was what she did not do. She did not sensationalize her pain. She did not weaponize denial. She did not seek to control public opinion. Instead, she chose restraint. As legal proceedings continued, she remained cautious, measured, and consistent, understanding that words spoken too quickly could cause further harm. She acknowledged a painful truth that few are willing to accept, that living in the public eye does not shield anyone from private devastation. Sometimes the bravest act is not speaking louder. Sometimes it is waiting, listening, and allowing truth to emerge on its own. Her story, once defined by innocence and resilience, had entered a new chapter, one not shaped by scripts or applause, but by uncertainty, accountability, and emotional survival. And as the world watched, one question lingered quietly beneath it all. How do you move forward when the life you trusted no longer exists? This moment did not rewrite her past, but it forever changed how it would be remembered. For many, her legacy had been frozen in time, a child running barefoot across the prairie, a symbol of innocence untouched by darkness. Yet life is rarely that simple, and legacies are not built only on who we were, but on how we respond when everything we believe in is shaken. As the legal process continued, she understood something deeply painful. No amount of past goodness could shield her from the present. No reputation, no decades of trust, no beloved role could make this moment disappear. And still, she stood firm. She did not attempt to separate herself from responsibility, nor did she claim moral superiority. Instead, she acknowledged the weight of uncertainty and the damage that silence or denial could cause. Her response was not about preserving an image. It was about honoring truth, even when truth was unbearable. For survivors watching from afar, her words carried meaning, not because they offered answers, but because they centered compassion over comfort. She made it clear that protecting children, listening to victims, and allowing justice to unfold mattered more than protecting reputations, including her own. This stance came at a cost. Some fans struggled to reconcile the woman they adored with the reality she now faced. Others found renewed respect in her refusal to deflect blame or distort facts. In a world obsessed with instant judgment, her patience became its own quiet statement. Her legacy, once defined by childhood innocence, was evolving into something more complex. A portrait of a woman who had lived through fame, loss, love, and now moral devastation without surrendering her values. history would remember her not only for who she played, but for how she behaved when life stopped following the script. Because sometimes a strength is not proven in success. It is proven in moments when there is nothing left to win.